Still thinking.
We're live.
And we are, we're live.
There we go.
Perfect. Well, hello world. Hope everyone's doing well. It is again, doing another nighttime live stream. I think that's the third one this week, I think. So today we've got Connor Grooms. He's with us today. And we're just gonna be talking about languages. So Connor, I don't know, I'm assuming, my assumption is that most, if not anyone who follows me, my assumption is they don't have any idea who you are.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't you give us the background of you? Like, tell us where you come from, what's your background in languages, what do you do, or what do you study? Just whatever you want.
How I got into it is I'm just a rapid learning geek in general. So I'm not specific to languages. I just like learning things quickly, or just doing things quickly. So when I left university and started traveling about 2.5 years ago, I started doing these short little challenges to learn different things in a short period of time. First thing was DJing, and then I put on a lot of weight, lean mass, 6-week period. And then the third one was learning Spanish in a month. And I shot a documentary about that called Spanish in a Month. And that's basically what has sent me into focusing much more heavily on languages now.
When did you shoot that? When was that? I remember watching it maybe 4 months ago, but I don't think you shot it 4 months ago. I don't think. Anyway.
No. I shot it when I got here to Medellin. So I'm still living here. And that was, I arrived like June 10th of 2015. So last year. So I shot that between the middle of June and the middle of July of 2015.
Cool. That's awesome. So tell us, obviously I've watched the documentary. I thought it was very, very fascinating. Because there's a lot, it was interesting that when I read the title, I remember thinking like, learning Spanish in a month, that's really interesting. And my initial thought before watching it was going, wow, is this guy going to go in and become like perfect 100% fluent in Spanish in 1 month, or like what's going to happen here? And
yeah,
go ahead.
I was very clear about defining early on in the film what I defined the goal to be, and that was like what I called functionally conversational. Is basically like an intermediate level of conversational, being able to have conversations about most any topic, and it's not going to be perfect, and I'm still going to be missing words, but it's not going to slow things down, and it doesn't limit me in what I can do. So I'm not completely effortless to the level that I am now. I won't even say I'm effortless now, but you know what I mean, of being at like a very high level. I'm just like, this is a conversational ability. I'm having conversations, and I'm having conversations about pretty much anything, and I'm not limited. So I define that as the goal. I think getting to the point where you're not even have to think about it, that takes a little bit more time of honing and just using the language more.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, right? Like when you look at, so I've been in the language learning space for a long time, like I guess technically since I was 5, since I was in a French school, but probably more since the age of 15, 16, because that's when I really started liking languages. But it's interesting how you'll often find people who have studied a language for, 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, 10 years, 3 years, for a number of years, and they still don't have that conversational ability. It's really fascinating to be able to get there in a month. Like
that's a twofold problem. Is a lot of people focus on tools that don't involve them actually speaking to people. They'll use Duolingo or software or books and movies or whatever they're using, audio programs. Now these things aren't bad by themselves. They can be useful. But the problem is they're getting this influx of information, and they've got this matrix of Spanish or Portuguese or Chinese or whatever language they're learning in their head. And to get to conversational, you actually have to use that, because you've got this matrix in your head, but then you go to form a sentence and you're like, so I need that and then this other thing, and then it doesn't work. And then people talk at you and you're like, so if they wrote what they said, you'd understand it right away. But because people don't put the emphasis on sound, and people don't put the emphasis on actually forcing themselves to speak, they're stuck with all this like jumble of knowledge that isn't as useful, because language is just like any other skill. It's built on repetition. So if you actually want to be able to speak, you've got to actually speak. And then the other thing is, I think years or months or however you want to measure it's the wrong measurement. It's not about like how many years you spend. Yeah, I can spend, I've spent 3 years learning Chinese, for instance. But if I'm spending like 30 minutes a week, of course I don't know shit. So it's about the time that you put in, not the amount of like calendar time that passes. So
it's
for
almost
instance,
like the amount of hours and the intensity of the hours kind of sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yeah, just the number of hours. So like, for instance, if I told people I learned Spanish in 5 months, people are like, oh, that's kind of good, like, but it's not impressive. But that's an hour a day. But now I switch that around. I do 5 hours a day and do it in 1 month. It's the same amount of time, and suddenly it's impressive. I don't think it necessarily needs to be. It's just that I condensed what you would typically do over a longer period of time down. Now, roughly 150 hours is still relatively quick. And I think that is the measurement you should go by. When I recently did Portuguese in the beginning of this month, I think I got to that conversation level after 3 days. And the number of hours input for that was much lower. So for me, that was a much crazier experience of learning that much faster. So one second, my computer is going to die. Let me run and grab a charger.
What's that? Just getting a charger. Oh, so Connor's disappeared? Oh, that's all right. Oh, you're just grabbing a charger there, Connor?
All right, I'm back. Okay, sorry about that.
Cool, perfect. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so you're just saying how like the hours are what really matters, and not as much as like the calendar days per se.
Right. I mean, it's the hours and then what you do with those hours, of course. Like,
right.
If you're doing something ineffective during that time period, it's going to be almost as good as not doing anything.
And I think what was interesting, and this is like and I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on this. Like my take on it's almost like there's, the way I see it, there's really two different. In the initial phases, I almost view it as there's two different ways for you to go and learn a language, right? You could go let's call it the traditional classroom approach, where you take classes, et cetera, and that's great, right? Like you'll get good marks in your classes, you'll do well on the tests, you might get your degree in a language, you might get some certifications, you might get a lot of that, but your speaking ability might not be amazing. And then you can go the other way, where you have heavy focus on speaking, and which is great, which means you can speak well, but all of a sudden, if you take that knowledge and apply it in the classroom, in the initial phases, you actually might not do well in the class. That's kind of like from my experience. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I am completely in the second camp of worrying about real world use. I don't really care about the classroom. So I'm not sure how my Spanish would translate to the classroom. I think once you get to a certain level.
Have you taken a language in a classroom setting before?
Yeah, in high school. And I was completely awful. I learned very little. I took Chinese for 3 years. I don't remember almost anything.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure I could probably pick it up faster, if I was to restart it. But no, I mean, it's abysmal. And the funny thing is, I talk to people, on a daily basis now, who are trying to learn, and like, yeah, I learned like a little bit. For instance, I was just talking to someone. It's like, oh, I learned a little bit of Thai because I was doing Thai kickboxing and I was conversational in Thai, and now I'm trying to learn Spanish, and I feel like I'm progressing so slow. And she told me what she was doing, and she's like doing more of a classroom approach, trying to learn the grammar, trying to figure like the language out. I'm just like, that stuff is important. Like you need to know that stuff. But the reason you learn Thai so quickly is because you just spoke it. Like you used it. People learn languages because they need them, because they're using them in the real world. Because you need to generate a sentence, you need to understand someone, and telling you how to do a certain kick in your kickboxing class in Thailand. That's where you're going to see the fastest results. But as far as the classroom, I don't know. I don't particularly care personally, because I care about real world use, and the Spanish I have is very, very good for that. So if that means that I might fail a class, who gives a shit?
Yeah,
that's how I look at it.
For sure. Yeah, really think it depends on people's goals, right? What their
Exactly.
language
It depends on the goal. And some people, though, need to take those tests for work reasons, to prove that they have a certain level, because they need to be, quote unquote, B1 or B2 or C1 for whatever job they're doing. Like, if they're a airline steward, for instance, it's like, okay, you need to pass this test to prove that you speak the language, and then you can be paid an extra $2 an hour.
Yep. Yeah. It really depends on. I think that's exactly, as a gen gets, the way my perspective on it anyway is, your approach has to match what your end goal is, right? So if you want to, for example, let's use your example. Your goal is to be an airline steward or stewardess, and you want to work on a plane. Well, if that's the end goal, your approach needs to match you being able to do that, right? You might not just be able to go and just focus on the speaking, because you got to be practical and go, hey, well, there's some tests I have to take to get the job. On the flip side, if listen, I'm in China right now, for example, I need to work in China, I have a job, but I can't speak with any of my colleagues. Well, that's a very different story. Now it doesn't matter that, if you take that academic approach, because you just need to communicate and have friends and end your loneliness.
Yeah, and there's something you brought up for a moment there. Depending on what you're using a language for, or just what you're interested in, the vocabulary that you're going to need is going to be quite different. So
for sure,
the airline steward is going to need a lot of vocabulary at an early stage that I don't know, that you don't know, that we don't need to know. Just like the fisherman is talking about different things than the mathematician, which is talking about different things than the designer. Basically, within any language, there's only a certain body of words that everyone needs. Once you've gotten that like base of like stuff that everyone uses, then it's just a matter of learning the vocabulary specific to the things that you want to talk about. So that's why I always tell people, it's like, okay, learn the fundamental stuff, the most common stuff that everyone needs. And at that point, learn how to say things that you would talk about in your native language. If you love talking, about, race cars, read about race cars or talk about race cars in Spanish or in whatever language you're learning. And then you're going to learn words relevant to that subject. And that way, you actually have the vocabulary for the subjects you care about. Like, I don't have the vocabulary to be a surgeon in English.
Yeah.
So, that's ultimately, like, some people, like, for instance, I've gotten questions before. Oh, how do I don't want to learn just Spanish. I need medical Spanish, for instance. They're like, oh, I don't care about Spanish. I need medical Spanish. I'm like, okay, well, do you realize that medical Spanish is just Spanish with some extra vocabulary? If you want to be able to talk about any different subject, you're just adding vocabulary to like this like fundamental base of grammar and core words. And that's basically how it works with any language.
Yeah, you have your base, and then depending on the thing you want to almost, I don't know if specialize is the right word, but let's say focus on, you'll need different vocabulary just for that topic. So
yeah, whether it's professional reasons or that's just what you're interested in. So in a professional context, yeah, you need to know the words for an airline steward. They need to know the words for that because they need it for their job. But if you, just have friends, then you just talk about the things you need to learn, the things that you want to be able to talk about for the social reason.
Right. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can definitely relate for that in my French and Spanish, for example. It was really interesting. I was actually having a conversation about this with someone, would have been, I think, roughly a week ago. And so, for example, if I need to go to like a market and buy something in like some sort of a street market, then reality is I'm probably way more comfortable in Spanish than French. But on the flip side, if I need to have a very intellectual conversation, I'm probably better off in French than Spanish, just because my vocabulary in both is very different.
Right, because the things you're going to talk about in each of those cultures is different.
Yeah, exactly. In France, for example, which is where I learned my French, you don't have a lot of street markets. It's not overly common, but you go to Peru, Chile, not so much Chile, but Peru for sure. That there's so many, they're everywhere. And so I'm used to bargaining and asking for cheaper prices, and that's just something I've done.
Yeah,
spent many hours doing. So
yeah, I would touch on the subject of that. Is slang is like the best thing ever for bargaining. Of course, if you greet the guy, hey, parece, you don't know, it's gonna be a lot better than, like, for instance, here, versus if you're opening with hola amigo, ¿cómo estás? Both are correct, but one is just more familiar. So when you use slang, you're basically, I go out of my way when I'm meeting new people to use, to speak just a little extra paisa, just because it makes them more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, it just makes them more comfortable. It's more familiar to them. And they're instantly just like, they're disarmed because like, oh, this guy gets it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So
pause 2 seconds, Connor. So, sorry, pause for 2 seconds. A question come through from Lester.
Okay.
Lester is asking his question is like some books to learn English. That's his question.
Okay.
Lester, what level in English, Lester? I think it depends on what your level is, right? If you're very advanced, then it's different. If you could just type in the chat, Lester, when you get a second, and we can come back to that. So anyway, sorry, Connor. You can keep going with what you're saying.
I'm not getting these questions if I should be.
Oh, Connor, you're there? You
Yeah,
froze
I'm here.
there.
You're back?
I think you just froze for a sec.
Okay. I'm not getting these questions in the group chat if I'm supposed to be.
What's that?
I'm not seeing this question in the group chat if I'm supposed to be.
No, I don't think you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so don't worry about it.
Cool.
So Lester saying he knows basic English. He just replied here. He knows some basic English. I don't know. And anything particular? Any books you'd recommend for him at all, Connor?
I didn't use books at all for learning Spanish, so I'd be quite bad at recommending for this. I would say once he's gone to more of an intermediate level, so maybe you can help him at the basic level. Once he's gone to an intermediate level, read books. This is pertinent to what I said before. Read books about things that you would want to read books about in your native language. Because again, you're going to learn, the books are great for vocabulary. So you're going to learn a ton of words relevant to what you want to talk about. And it's just going to be more enjoyable.
Yep.
But at a beginning stage, I don't know, maybe you can help.
Yeah, my thoughts would be, if you're, I've got a couple. One is, again, Lester, not sure how much speaking you're doing, but I am a huge believer that speaking needs to come first. At least in my opinion, in my experience of language learning, that tends to be the fastest way for someone to get better. So speaking should come first. However, if you are doing a lot of speaking and you're looking for books as like an additional or like a supplement, and you're at kind of a basic level, I would highly recommend you start with children's books. Children's books are your best friend. Reason being is if you're at a basic level and you're trying to read big fat big fat books, you know, it's just not going to happen. Like you need to look up every single word in a dictionary. It's going to be the worst experience for you. So I would, you know, if it is a supplement, I would recommend you start with children's books, work your way up slowly. Actually, yeah, it's a good way to build your vocabulary. It's something I'm actually thinking about doing in Chinese. Hello, Dark Star Media. Thanks for hopping on. You're up very early in the morning. Sorry, someone else has typed in chat, but
Cool.
yeah, I don't know, Lester. I hope that helps you out. Feel free to chat. Anyone else is watching, I think, here. If anyone else has questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and then Connor, I'd be happy to share thoughts on them. So lost my train of thought. What were we talking about there, Connor, before we answered questions?
We were talking about slang.
Right, slang.
Right.
So yeah, shopping and slang, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I do with each of the languages I've learned, so initially Spanish and now Portuguese recently, is I try to be like from a specific city, because that gives me something to latch on to. So like I'm very purposely have Paisa Spanish. You know, my Spanish is very much as it's spoken in Medellin. And when I learned Portuguese, I'm like, I want to be very carioca. You know, definitely want to be, you know, from Rio. Mm-hmm. And doing this gives you sort of like for me at least, gives me sort of a guiding compass of like, there's a million different ways you could say something. It's like, okay, how would they say it in Medellin or in Portuguese? Okay, how would they say this? How would they pronounce this in Rio? And then that way I can latch onto that, and I can just be like from that place. And then when I travel, people are still going to understand me just like they would understand someone that's from somewhere else. But for me, it gives me a little bit more culture to each language instead of just being a jumble of like, yeah, I've learned this language and I'm just a jumble of slang from all these different countries, and my Spanish is a jumble of different, you know, colloquialisms and everything from all over. Then you're sort of just a jumble, and you're obviously foreign everywhere. But if you like become from one city, then even say if I'm in Mexico, they're gonna recognize, oh, this guy's freaking Paisa, or he's you know, he's living in Medellin. Like they'll know that. Yeah. It just gives
you can
me
hear it in your accent and in your way you speak.
Exactly. And then just gives you, like I said, like a guiding compass of like how to pronounce things. Okay, you got to choose some accent to latch on to. So you may as well choose one, and then you're like, okay, how would the person from here say it?
Right. Interesting, because they have very different opinions on it. It sounds like, again, Connor, this is the first real conversation or anything, but it sounds like we're more in agreement on things than disagreement. Because that's something personally when I've learned, so French and Spanish, and now probably less with Chinese, but still doing it, is I picked a very specific accent that mattered to me, and very, very specific dialect, and I really focused on that. And I wanted to really sound like that dialect and have that language, that country's slang, that region's slang, that region's words. And then from there, I learned about the other ones after. So for example, my Spanish, so my Spanish, for example, is very, it's heavily influenced by a Peruvian Spanish, more specifically like a Southern Peruvian. Now, I've also traveled around, so I picked up words from different places, and I have friends from a lot of places. So it is a little bit more, I don't know if international is but for sure, especially it's more adaptable. Yes, I know if I'm speaking to someone from Spain, I'm not going to say jugo, I'm going to say sumo. Or if I know that, you know, if I'm speaking to someone who's not from Chile, I'm not going to say, hey, vamos al tiro, pues. Or sorry, po, actually, vamos al tiro, po. Right? Like, it would be different because I'm not from Chile. And you're like, what's al tiro? What does that mean?
I'm not going to greet someone in Spain like, ¿qué parece?
And for me, parece, what does that mean? I don't even know what that means. I've never,
exactly. Parece is like dude. It's like tío in Spain. So there's the learning about slang in other places. I'm only going to use tío in Spain, if even there. But like parece is like bro. It's like dude. Parcero. This one you probably know, huevón, is pretty similar.
Leon,
I
yep,
think,
yep,
yeah,
yep,
they have
yep.
that in Peru.
Yeah, I
So
think it's more in Chile actually. Leon is more in Chile than Peru, but
okay, cool.
yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So you know about all the other ones, but like if you get into a conversation back where you're like from that language, you're instantly just like full Peruvian. I'm full Paisa. I'm exactly. And then when you're in other places, you can sort of cut down some of the slang a little bit and adapt it to the local environment, just like a local from that place would do.
Who are not necessarily big on that. Like for example, I was teaching someone French 3 months ago, and he specifically wanted to learn with me because he thought that my French was like a French, though that's not really my natural French. And I asked him why, and he said, well, I've got a teacher who's from France. I want someone from Dialects so I can really have a good ear for everything, which I agree to an extent. It's not necessarily, but it's not necessarily my personal.
Right. You're super choppy on the connection.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That's the only thing running. So, okay. Seems good again. You there? You back?
Cut out.
Seems about how it was before. But it's manageable. It's manageable. Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with like you like specialize in a city, but like of course I want to be able to understand a Cuban person when they're speaking. But are we going no video?
Yep, I just turned the video off. Maybe that'll help.
Okay. Yeah, so like I want to be able to understand people from different places, but I don't necessarily need to sound like them, if that makes sense.
Right. For sure. Cool. I think we're having some internet issues, so maybe this is a good time to start coming to a close. Yeah, is there like where should people go to learn more about you?
If you are learning Spanish, there's 2 places you can go. The first is my company Baselang. So we offer unlimited one-on-one Spanish tutoring for $100 a month. So that's baselang.com, BASELANG. And if you just want my free email course on basically all the tips that I've got about basically the strategy behind learning Spanish, and these tips are also applicable to other languages for the most part, you can just go to shortcuttoconversational.com. And that's my
conversation.
Yeah, shortcuttoconversational.com. Those are the 2 places I would go to first. Yeah, and then if you haven't seen the documentary already, just search anything related to Spanish on YouTube, and it should come up. But it's called Spanish in a Month. I think everyone here will enjoy that if you're into this sort of language nerdery like we are.
Yeah, I've actually linked that up in the description as it is. So
beautiful.
Cool. All right. Well, I will cut the stream here. So it's nice chatting, and I guess we'll talk later.
Yeah. Cheers.